we're going to start by just introducing, this is Marco. Marco is all about audio-visual, and he developed the lecture theatre that you're in now. Ian is our videographer, and he will be around the show floor often with his kit. And we've got Martin, who's our web streaming specialist. So they will introduce themselves more fully. I've given them 30 seconds just to say exactly what they are, exactly what they do in a day-to-day capacity. So just 30 seconds on what your role is.
My name is Marco Noordegraaf, and I'm the manager of ACS International Projects. We provide mainly medical conferences such as cardiology, urology, hematology conferences with temporary conference rooms in exhibition centers such as we are right now here. Multiple rooms, and obviously we fully equip these rooms with carpet, chairs, curtains, sound absorbent curtains, so we don't have any disturbance. Thank you. It's one of my guys. And we fully supply all the AV for all these conferences.
Okay. And Ian, do you have is there a typical day in the life of a videographer?
Well, I wouldn't say there's a typical day, because ultimately I'm a journalist, but what I do is I help brands and businesses tell stories in a journalistic way to engage more with their audiences rather than just selling all the time. And you'll see me around here. This is a kind of a typical day for me at a show like this is running around the show floor, interviewing as many people as I can in as many different aspects of the show as I possibly can do to take the temperature, not just say, why are you here, why is Eibtm great, but also dig into a little bit of insight from every single person I talk to, so that when you watch the videos back on the Eibtm website, or when you open them in your email when you've received their daily alert, there's actually something of interest for you to watch. And also it's very interesting to find out why people are here, but ultimately you want to find out a little bit about them, a little bit about their business. So that's what I do, and you'll see me running around the show with my little piece of kit, which I'll explain a little bit more about later. And yeah, just reporting on what's around.
Okay, Martin, is there a typical day for you in the role of web streaming?
No. No. We help conference owners to record and stream their content, whether that be live or on demand, and we make it as simple and as easy as possible for them to take their massive investment that they make in their educational content, their conference content, and turn it into assets that can be used and exploited over an extended period of time and to a much bigger audience than is ever physically going to attend. Consequently, there's no typical day, because we work for a very broad range of different clients, from public sector through to large corporate companies, and a lot of work for associations, particularly medical sector associations. So every day is really quite different.
Right, brilliant. Okay. So you've heard what our specialists are doing. Can I just have an idea of who we have in this room right now? So do we have any students in here? No students? One student. Brilliant. Okay. Any lecturers? Any faculty people? Okay, Corbin. John as well. Okay, cool. What about event planners, meeting planners, designers? Okay. Right. Okay, cool. And the rest of you will be suppliers of event services to some degree, I guess. Would that be right? Yeah? Okay. Any venues in the room? Anybody representing the venue? Okay, right, good. All right, thank you for that. So sometimes it can be hard to get questions from an audience. So I've come up with a little alternative, which is I'm going to ask somebody just to pick a block, and then that's going to be the spur for the question that goes through, and then we should get some other questions coming in, because we really want you to make the most out of this. So I'm going to start with asking John to pick one of the blocks. AV cost, brilliant. No, that's all right.
Okay.
Yeah. They probably won't be able to read my writing half the time. So Marco, AV cost. Is it expensive? Is it one of those questions where people think it's already scary in my mind because it's audio visual? How do you address the issue of cost with clients?
Well, we think that costs, obviously, AV, definitely if you need professional AV, it comes at a cost. It's not the home theater set that you're able to use in a group of 100, 200 people. So definitely there are costs involved in the actual equipment that you need to use in order to be able to project on a screen as big as this, or to have audio with a quality that you can have everybody in the room hear it correctly. There are costs in microphones. You cannot do it with a €2.50 microphone, for example. So all these pieces of equipment, lighting equipment, rigging, everything is very expensive to buy, also for the AV supplier. So it's not that we can use these microphones on a daily basis. So we have to calculate how many numbers of days we can use, or we can rent out microphones, for example, or screens or whatever, and then calculate the daily cost for it to rent. Also keeping in mind that microphones have a bit longer lifespan than projectors, for instance. Technology goes very fast, so you have to write things off in about 3 years.
Right.
So that creates costs, obviously. And it's also a bit hazy where the costs are sometimes. So always request very detailed quotation if you don't fully trust the guy providing you the quote.
Yeah, okay. So can meeting planners, can they actually really trust that you're looking after them in absolutely the right way, and you're not going to try to give them something that they don't actually need? Or do meeting planners come to you and know exactly what they want, or how much guiding do you have to do?
The majority of the meeting planners, or we work a lot for associations or PCOs, they have a quite good understanding of what they want based on previous years.
Right.
We have long-term relationships with a lot of clients, of course, 10 years, 15 years. So they know that we provide what they need, and they don't even have to ask for anything. We know what they want and what they need. But new clients, obviously, they have experiences with previous suppliers.
Yeah.
But it's always difficult to understand, if you're not really into it, that you are getting exactly what you need and not a lot of stuff extra. Afterwards you will probably notice.
Right, okay. And I want to flip now to Ian. In video, you can make a video with somebody. It may take a short period of time after the preparations and you've got everybody into the right position. But do people forget to build in any kind of editing time, or do you find... Do you have any issues with people saying, right, okay, I want it tomorrow, and that puts up the price? Or what kind of issues do you have in your business around price?
I find there's a complete lack of knowledge about video, completely. So first of all, people don't really understand what it can do for them. I think certainly on the event side, for example, in an association meeting setting, for example, I don't even know whether there's generally a video strategy for the majority of association meetings. I mean, if we have any association planners in the room, maybe they can tell me whether they have a video strategy in place. Do they video any of their meetings? And they're probably saying to me, no, we don't, because we don't think we need to. And that's fair enough. But I think there's a lack of appreciation about what video can bring to the table. So yeah, essentially, which we'll probably go into a little bit later, but essentially with respect to expectations, that there's just a simple lack of knowledge. So what we do is we look at the basic objectives that people are looking for from their event, their communication strategies, what their aims are with their delegates, and we find out what other communications strategies they have, and then we work with them to find out how video can add to that communication strategy, how it can improve their objectives. And then, so it's kind of an educational process, really.
Right, okay.
But yes, obviously, things need to be taken into account, like what the video is going to be used for. That all relates to the sophistication of the equipment we use, and therefore that affects the editing time. At Eibtm, I shoot everything currently on an iPhone because the aim is to turn around the videos very quickly, and also so we can get them out on the website during the show and almost create like a channel alongside the event for people who aren't here, for people who are here. And so it has it creates a really, it creates an online experience of the actual show that you can't get. But of course, in other situations, for an association meeting, for example, you won't need the video to be turned around that quickly. But what you might like is a sort of a 5-minute summary, an assessment of the event that you've just held, so that you can use it to promote yourself as an organizer, so you can use it to add value to the the association, because obviously associations hold meetings because they're valuable, and associations therefore have to prove the value of the meetings that they're holding. And so we kind of work with all different sorts of businesses on there, to fit in with their main objectives, and then fit video into their communication strategies.
Okay, thank you. And the meeting planners that we've got in the room, are you guys are you capturing content on video, or is that something that you're not doing at the moment? You are? Okay. Who are the meeting planners again? I know I've got your good self here. Right. Okay. So you're capturing some. Does that work for? Actually, I will need that. Does that work for getting people excited about your event the next time round?
Well, in our case, we're a medical devices company, and we welcome some speakers to our internal events because it's all about education, and that's why we would capture content.
Right, okay.
That's really encouraging, that's great. Yeah.
Sorry, say again?
So that's really encouraging, that's great.
Yeah. Any other comments from any other meeting planners about the value of video for future events?
The value would be like, for example, an internal events. It's when you have like a new strategy to present to the company. Sometimes the employees, they don't know really about it. So if you film, because not everyone can attend a high-level management meeting, so if you film it and then just edit it and present some bits of it, then for people it's more real, and they understand better the message and what is expected from them. And also when you do events around funding or charity, also it's very moving. So you don't want to pity people, but you want to make them aware of the problem, and sometimes the words are not enough. So it's better that you film the action, what your company is doing to make things better, and so on. So I think the video, sometimes it's much more effective than any other thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I mean, that just gives two fantastic examples of what I'm talking about. You've got two really, great mini case studies there of how you can use video to do a little bit more than you might expect. So that's great. It's fantastic.
Do you find, Ian, that people actually do people get scared of video when we can have a chat, we can be very natural, and then you get a camera, and how much does that alter the dynamic? And do you have ways of unfreezing people if?
I mean, yeah, it's all about technique when you're interviewing people, really. I mean, around the show this week, you'll see that I'm in front of the camera with the people I'm interviewing. If you're doing a lot of interviews very quickly, in order to, you want people to, deliver the best interview you can. I can't really spend an hour interviewing somebody and every time they make a mistake, we start again. So I have to get into a situation whereby I put them at ease, and so therefore they feel like we're having a conversation and almost ignore the camera. The best way to do that is what I do here, and it's to actually get in front of the camera with them. Also, it helps at Eibtm because I've been in the meetings industry for quite some time, So as a result, I have a certain profile, and that helps, with people watching the videos too. But ultimately, I'm in front of the camera to actually put my interviewee at ease. In a more corporate setting or in an association meeting setting, they don't want me in front of the camera. You don't want a personality in front of the camera particularly. So I would be interviewing them from behind the lens. And that is a slightly more intimidating situation. So once again, you just have to explain to people that you're just after delivering insight. You're not after trying to trip them up. I'm not an investigative reporter. I'm just trying to get the best information I can for the particular situation. A key element of that as well is eye contact. If you make eye contact with people, once again, they relax very quickly. They forget about whatever's around them, because also in some of these settings you're interviewing people in very busy situations, so sometimes it's hard for them to focus. So that's another technique you can use. But ultimately it's just chat through what you're going to be talking about with them beforehand, and also, if you can do, identify key interviewees before the event starts. Don't try and surprise people during the event. If there are key people you think need to be you need to be interviewing, for example, speakers, key delegates, then contact them by email in advance, send over questions in advance so they can prepare. That all helps to make people more relaxed, and therefore they perform better and give more insight when you're interviewing them.
Brilliant. Okay, now Martin, you've been sitting there very patiently, so I'm coming to you next. How complicated is it for people to do some web streaming, some live streaming? Is it a really complex process? What kind of questions do you expect people to be asking? Or what do you need to know from people so that they can get the best benefit from you?
Okay, there's a few questions there in one, I think. How complex does it need to be? At its absolute basic level, it can be very, very simple. You can web stream an event just using a camera, a laptop, and a little interface. It can be really very, very simple. At the higher end, the big congresses and events, then obviously we're back into Marco's territory. We have full-size cameras, vision mixers, and we take feeds from that and stream it out. So it really is horses for courses in terms of how complex does it need to be. But if budget is everything, then it can be incredibly simple and very straightforward. And there's a lot of free tools you can use. YouTube, for example, you can, if you have an account on YouTube, these days you can live stream on YouTube, which is a huge value, really. And means that pretty much any event can be available online.
Yeah, okay. So do we have any burning questions from the audience at the...
Coming back to the interview, do you have tips about the colors you should wear? Because I remember sometime there was an internal video that we were doing, and someone was dressed too much in black, too dark. So sometimes we don't think about those details because we are not specialists. So what would be your tips? What is the best for how it looks on the screen? What to wear? The makeup and things like this?
Well, with respect to makeup, in a situation like this, you wouldn't really need it. If you're videoing an event, generally, I would have thought that makeup's not really that important. But having said that, it all depends on the level of production that you have. For example, if you are live streaming, for example, to broadcast, say you're actually broadcasting to a TV channel, it could be something that's run by an association, an internal company TV channel, then you'll probably need to get in a makeup artist. At an event that I covered recently, the RSMP ICA event in Amsterdam in June, about 2 hours of that event was streamed live to TV, and because they just wanted it to look very professional, they actually had makeup artists helping the presenters look the best. Now, I've never seen that before, but that shows how things are moving on. So I can see a situation in the not too near future where all your events are streamed, whereby it might be necessary to invest in makeup artists as well. If you're streaming things generally just to YouTube, you probably don't need to worry about it. And if you're in quite a natural settings, you don't need to worry too much. You were talking about colours to wear. Well, everybody makes fun of me because all I ever wear is black, which is actually true. It's pretty much all I ever wear. You can't generally go wrong with black, but in certain situations, like today, for example, a lot of theatres have black backdrops. I would disappear into it if that was the case. So what I would probably do in that sort of situation is check out what the theatre is first, keep the black suit, maybe wear a coloured shirt so that you can take it off and people can see you. Avoid patterns, particularly complex patterns, because they play with the frame rates of the video. Yeah. And they create what's called a moire effect, I think it's called. So it looks like your shirt's moving, basically. So avoid that. Anything too bright, although I think, just dress up and look your best whenever you can.
Right, brilliant. There was another question, I think, that was over on the far side. Abby's doing a great job of running around with the mic.
Come on, Abby, quicker. Come on.
Hi, Alan Broadbent, Accessible Services. I specialise in services for disabled delegates to events and meetings. Many events and meetings make no services whatsoever for people with disabilities, whether it's hearing impaired or sight impaired. So it's coming more and more under scrutiny for AV and for videoing to actually increase accessibility, particularly with captioning, for instance. How would that actually work with live streaming, for instance? How would you make the events more accessible?
Yeah, I take your points, and it's certainly an area that's increasingly under the microscope. For us, it's relatively straightforward to deal with if we have a customer that wants to address that. In a number of ways. I mean, obviously captioning and subtitling is one way of doing it, and it is possible now to live caption. It's quite pricey, but it's possible to do it, as it is to caption in different languages. And the other way that to accommodate people is with signing, and it's relatively straightforward to, into the stream, plug in another camera which is filming a signer, in the same way as you'd have a signer alongside the lectern. It's just another visual source that gets piped into it. So, I mean, it's not a perfect answer, but it's certainly moving along the way. That said, even now it's very rare we actually get asked for any of that, which is not good, obviously, but hopefully things will change in that regard.
The other day, because we're
if I can
working
just follow on to that,
Yeah.
It's a very common response to when people say, "Oh, we rarely get asked for something." So, for instance, in the Eibtm, 3 years ago, when we first started working with the Eibtm as the supplier of accessible services, the response was, "We rarely get asked for things." But if we take this week's event as an example, we have 5 scooter users, we have 7 wheelchair users here. So yes, there is a demand for things when people are made actually aware of it. For instance, on the AV side of things, it's rarely there is rare provision for people who are hearing impaired with audio loop systems. Yet, if you look at some of the major convention centres, Dublin is a perfect example where, with that particular building, the whole place has been designed with accessibility in mind. So it is possible to do these things. But as you say, there is a cost involved, and that's usually the reason why people say they're not going to do it. But my supplementary question then is, how can you actually avoid not doing it when actually in most countries now, in Europe and in the United States with the Americans with Disabilities Act, with legislation, you are actually compelled to do this?
Yes, I agree. And in fact, if you look at online video, I think it's about, it's certainly a good number of years that any online video should have captioning. But God knows what percentage, but there's very little of it actually does. And it does come down to practicalities. I mean, maybe it's a business angle for us to proactively offer it. Certainly something I'll consider, but currently it's been driven by client demand.
Okay. And there's another question coming up because Abby's running with that microphone again. It's
Sorry,
John.
I just wanted to feed back a little bit. Turning Technologies actually make a audience response keypad which is Braille ready, and we have used it in Dubai for several large events. So they do actually provide that, and you know, it's a kind of not a very well-known fact, but Braille is there, and it is an actual keypad that exists on the market. So if you're ever looking for that, then I've used it and to great success. It's got a vibrating battery for feedback as well, so it works really well.
Right, okay, so I'm going to ask Marco about the ratio 16 to 9 and 4 to 3. Tell us all about that.
Well, that's often a question, and it dates back basically to the time that the not the 9 o'clock news, that was a 4:3 film that we just saw, 4:3 ratio, and that has been pretty much standard since 1992 when PowerPoint was invented, and ever since everybody presented it in 4:3. These days, everybody at home has 16:9 full HD TVs, flat screens, and all that stuff. So the demand is shifting from 4:3 to 16:9. Basically, the screen that you see here is a 16:9 screen, and we did a picture-in-picture of the 4:3 footage of the not the 9 o'clock news. Still today, most presentations are done in 4:3. I don't know when that will die out, but still, the majority of at least the presentations that we handle, medical congresses, so a lot of professors and doctors, and they don't mess about. They just do the 4:3. They rather do it with the overhead sheets and stuff like that still. But anyway, but the demand of the congress organizer is more and more to do more branding about the congress, etc. So what we see more and more is just doing a 16:9 screen and do the picture-in-picture of the PowerPoint presentation in it, so you have room on the screen in your projection area left for branding, for sponsor logos, and stuff like that. And also in larger rooms, it's always very good to have a camera image of the speaker presenting, so we can do that on the other side of the beside the PowerPoint 4:3 insert, basically. So it depends on what you want to use. If you only want to project a PowerPoint slide, then you can still do with the 4:3, which we called old-fashioned, of course, but still is pretty much around everywhere. A lot of venues have standard in-house AV, which is still 4:3 because of the investments, of course, are huge.
Yeah.
So if it's only a PowerPoint you want to present, 4:3, perfect, no problem. If you want to do a little bit more, if you want to play around a little bit with your content and the possibilities, then you definitely want to look to 16:9.
Right, okay, good. Because some of these questions come from, we asked these guys what their 5 common questions were, so we're embroidering some of that today. And I think maybe the 4:3 may come because it's a kind of default on the PowerPoint. But Abby, who's basically arranged loads of these, she's looking after this whole lecture theatre and the education program for the Eibtm and other shows, was very specific in her notes to all of the speakers to say anything that you do in this room and upstairs has to be 16:9. So I think sometimes if we've got that kind of attention to detail going on, it saves the kind of last minute rejigging around that you guys can probably do, and I'm sure you do very well, but it's...
Yeah, but you don't prefer to do it on the spot. You need to prepare everything, and everything that you can prepare, please prepare, because you will always have the surprises of the projector not really liking a resolution or whatever, or a laptop behind stage, or a laptop from the presenter itself not connecting properly to the connections we have at the lectern. So always prepare, and if you do a briefing to your speakers, definitely, if everything is 16:9, please tell them bring 16:9. And until PowerPoint 2013, it was default 4:3, but now in PowerPoint 2013, it's default 16:9. So we are getting there, but it's
cool.
taking,
I like that.
it is taking some time. Yeah.
I do like that. Are you telling me, Marco, that there are still speakers that will rock up a few minutes before they're due to go on stage and actually just give you some kind of memory stick and expect it to be...
Yeah. Even some professors, they turn up with floppy drives still, so yeah, it's you never know what to expect. So there are a lot of systems in place now, and also within ACS, the company I represent, we have an IT department dealing with presentation management systems, all to avoid that our AV system that we have put up in all the rooms will be compatible with the presentations that speakers will bring. Yeah. Because it's delegates from all over the world, and they bring most exotic stuff you've never seen before. Yeah. So they have to go to the speaker service center, hand in the presentation, and go through it with a technician. So everything will work when it arrives to the room. Yeah. With all the equipment we have in that room. So yeah, we don't really like surprises.
You don't like surprises, but if the people maybe don't know what they need, if you send a list of, we've got all of these pieces of kit on our lorry that's coming to this event, that's really for your information rather than for theirs, because they wouldn't know what needs to go together. So it's just interesting. Sometimes you get some companies that will give you a big list of all 30 odd items that are basically everything that they've, put together. But I've got no idea, as a meeting planner, as to whether that's right, wrong, or indifferent. Yeah,
we never provide lists like that, because it's a list of equipment, and we name it at a different way than another supplier would name it. So we list the solution, and we do a description of what we will be doing in that room. So what kind of solutions will you see when you enter the room? And of course, there is a list of equipment needed. I mean, the technicians need to know which piece of equipment goes where, how to connect everything, etc. Of course, there is a list. Also, the warehouse needs to know what they have to pick and transport and ship. Yeah. But the client hardly ever understands. No. Well, they understand the larger bits and pieces, of course, but and they don't really care. That's my impression, at least. They just need the solution. If I want a couple of microphones, screens, comfort monitors, projection, for this size of room, etc., etc. That's the solution they are after, and not how we will succeed technically. It's not really that important.
Any questions? Excellent questions here.
Yeah, since we were talking about presentations. And by the way, I actually plan conferences. So I wanted to know, based on your experience, do you find that PowerPoint, Prezi, or Apple Keynote to be the best, especially on screen and when you guys are working with AV?
Well, it depends basically on the content. So if you do, for instance, we run congresses for hematology, which is blood, red, and all that very detailed stuff. And then you need a high power projector. If you do that in a PowerPoint, it might be, depending on in what resolution you created the PowerPoint, of course, it might not be as clear on the screen as you envisioned it on your laptop back home. So if it needs high res, it's better probably just to create a PowerPoint. A PDF, which is a bit more better visible on the screen. So we do have speaker guidelines available, and just as an advice to speakers how to prepare a presentation, whether it's in Prezi or in PowerPoint or whatever. But there are some tips and tricks, font size, etc., depending on the depth of etc. Yeah. Right. And sometimes also, if we have a speaker service center up and at a conference, we will still have time to amend some of the worst slides which we see. So we can really help the speakers there just to amend certain colors or backgrounds and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay, we've got another question I can see. I love the fact that people are asking questions, because this is all about you. We've got questions that we can keep throwing out, but it's your session. So whilst you've got the advantage, you've got the audio visual, you've got the video, you've got the web streaming, please keep asking these questions. That's great.
Thanks. So I've only just started working in the events industry, and so my question is probably, it's very simple. But you said that when you use a 16:9 screen, then you could do a PowerPoint presentation and then use a part of the screen for branding. Is that something that you would have to do, or is that something that when you're, would you have to do several layers? I mean, in practice, how does that work? How, if I were making a presentation, how would I be able to do that?
Well, you could do it in your presentation. If you create a 16:9 presentation, you can just create the area in which the PowerPoint presentation needs to go. So you can create it yourself, basically. But sometimes we create the background together with the client, and that will be a fixed background for all the slides which all the different presenters will present. And we will just do a picture-in-picture via, well, that's basically a technical piece of equipment. It's just a switcher or something sort. So you will just tip it in like this. Yeah, yeah. Thanks, guys.
Ah.
We don't see it here, so I don't. Yeah, so basically that is a very simple way of how to be flexible with your several inputs, your several sources. So you have the PowerPoint, you have camera, you have the background.
And isn't it true as well, Marco, that particularly like for corporate events and also for association events, they want a certain amount of uniformity. So they'll kind of want to maybe a template that all their speakers will follow, so that it's properly branded. Yep. And I presume as well that you guys and your team, as you said anyway, they're very experienced with all the different elements and all the different ways to present, including PowerPoint. And when I presented at a recent ICA event, I'm actually, although it sounds crazy, I'm pretty technically inept in many ways. I work with the technology that helps me do what I want to do, but like everybody, most people, I'm pretty rubbish at it. I'm particularly terrible at PowerPoint because my background's in publishing, so I work with a lot of DTP packages, and I can create lovely design PDFs, but I'm terrible at PowerPoint. When I had this problem at ICA, we worked with the AV guys there, and they said, "Oh, don't worry, we'll take your terrible PowerPoint mess and we'll create it into something that's properly branded for ICA, and basically the audience are going to be able to see when you're presenting." So I've had really good experiences along that side of things. But yeah, I think look for that sort of consistency if you're holding events, and get look for a properly branded backdrop, because it will reinforce all the messages you're trying to get across as well. But I think you'll find that the AV team will be really happy to work with you and develop that for you.
But yeah, plus that you also need to be flexible. Not only have a basic template for all the presentations, especially in the medical congresses. Obviously, you have the satellite symposia, the industry-sponsored symposia. So they would like to rebrand like within 5 minutes. So also the AV needs to be available and prepared for handling those.
John, you've been waiting really patiently there.
Yeah, no, I just had one quick comment and then a quick question for the streaming chap. I work for a company called Audience Alive. We're MVPs for PowerPoint, which means we actually help Microsoft develop PowerPoint. So, as you rightly pointed out, recently it changed over to 16:9 in 2013. Now that generates a whole issue going backwards with everyone with 4:3 aspect ratio. So when you open a 4:3 in Microsoft, it'll now ask you, do you want to maximize it or best fit it? So it will suck in your old 4:3, and you end up with these two guides at each side of it. So you can actually bring it in. It will convert a 4:3 to 16:9. So that's our experience with it, and it works really well. So we also can recommend creating the background for Prezi and some of the other things we've seen. There are 450 million installed base of Microsoft PowerPoint around the world. There are 30 million go on every day. There are a minimal amount of those compared in Prezi. We talk about audience nausea with Prezi because people go crazy with zooming effects. So watch out for your audience getting kind of overdone, spinning, looping effects. So Prezi used well is good, but generally we're facing non-stop PowerPoint presentations, so it's doing it better. And my quick question for streaming. We've run a couple of hybrid events recently and tried to use streaming, but we had major challenges with the bandwidth. What is the kind of ideal bandwidth generally? Because we tried to use it over the web, so and I was advised, hey, don't use the web. What if it goes down? But satellite trucks are pretty expensive where I come from in the Middle East, so it's a case of how do we? What's the ideal bandwidth, and how do we kind of allow for a rat chewing through a fiber optic cable and shutting down the internet on us?
Sorry, you said you tried to use it over the web. Do you mean Wi-Fi?
Wi-Fi. Oh, no. We had 40 megabit cabled, wired, but even that kind of. Is it the bandwidth, or is it? I heard of another word, cohesion. So is it the quality of service, or is it the bandwidth?
Contention.
Sorry.
Contention.
Thank you.
Yeah. You actually these days you can stream live with a pretty standard internet connection, as long as you are the only person using it. And I think that's the contention issue. You want to know that if you've got a connection, you need to know that it's a good speed and a consistent speed, and that can be quite low. You can get away with an incredibly low speed sometimes. Okay, it affects the quality of what you can deliver, but you can actually stream at quite low levels. Clearly, the faster the connection, the more data you can send and the better quality stream you can send. But we regularly work on very standard broadband connections of kind of a megabyte up, that kind of thing. But and it works well, and we can deliver good quality because the encoders are very efficient now. I mean, typically for if we record a 1 hour session that's streaming out live, the file would only be about 200 megabytes, which is, for video files, that's pretty, really very efficient, very small.
Incredibly good, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not too onerous on the connection at all, and you can get away with it. But if, for example, you wanted to stream an event out that was going to be projected on a large screen in a venue on the other side of the world, then you need to send a much higher quality stream, and that demands more bandwidth. So there's no finite, this is the amount you need. It depends on what you're trying to do. Fortunately, a lot of venues now are getting much more well connected, and it's not uncommon to find a venue that's got 100 megabytes up and down, which is fantastic. But again, you need to make sure that there aren't 400 delegates also using it for their tweets and everything else. So it's about knowing your venue and being able to make sure that you've got that protected. Mike Clanton should have been here, but could have answered lots of questions on that. But that's the nub of it, is making sure that whatever you've got is protected.
So we've got
okay,
you,
I'm
sir,
on.
and then you just...
Yeah, my question is a little bit of a combined question. I'm coming back not to the problem of color of clothes. No, we've got it here also. We are delivering mainly sound and light. And the big lag in this communication business is mainly the communication. So we are coming onto the venue, setting up the light and the sound designed as it was thought by the client. And then we will be informed, there will be some videographers also. And nobody knew it before, and we just put up LED lights, and the videographers went crazy because of the lights. So, and this together with the clothes, then we have a problem with the lights and the clothes that even the video is so high powered with megabytes that we have problem with the streaming again. So what is your suggestion in this really, for me, nearly standard case?
Give up and go home, basically, if it gets that bad. I think, as everybody said, you can't legislate for everything. You can only be as prepared as you can be. But you do need to, in this really multi-connected world in which we're now operating in, you need to try to take everything, every possible scenario into account. It was just thrown at you, so it's difficult to, to sort of, as I said, legislate for that. But I think as an organizer, you need to find out as much as you can about the various different communications methods that people are going to use to make sure that nothing about the production, where you can, is going to clash. Yeah, from my perspective, light is a nightmare, to be honest. I shoot, as I said, a lot of the stuff here on iPhone, and the iPhone is amazing because it's really flexible and I can put it into my laptop and edit things very quickly, but it has real limitations. So around the show floor, and the lighting here is very, very high level. and you get dead spots, and it's really difficult to get a consistent, sort of production. But then again, what I'm doing is reportage. It's not supposed to look fantastic. It doesn't matter if the lighting's not great on one shot. I'm shooting little 2-minute vignettes, delivering little nuggets of insight. So you've also got to look at the context. In certain situations, the lighting doesn't have to be perfect. If you're looking, for really high quality video production, then you need to bring in specific lights that create the required lighting. But otherwise, don't worry about it too much. But yes, with respect to connectivity and that kind of stuff, you really do need to do your homework, find out the various elements that could be introduced to your particular setting, and try to make sure that you've got all the bases covered.
Brilliant. And you sir, you've been waiting patiently as well, so.
I was recently at the Dublin Web Summit, and there was an issue with the Wi-Fi. How would you load tests for such a large number of people in advance of the event?
Sorry, what was the question? How would you
load tests? How would you ensure that you can manage the number of people who are going to be accessing the Wi-Fi in advance?
I'd make sure I got somebody like Mike Clanton looking after the internet connectivity, and make sure that there are specialists involved in doing that. I mean, we stream, we deliver content over the web, but there are a number of very expert specialist organisations that will sort out venue connectivity and event connectivity.
And that's particularly important at the moment, because there's such a variety of connectivity across venues. We're all constantly frustrated. Even in a venue like the Ferro Barcelona, as soon as everybody gets on the Wi-Fi, suddenly it slows. It can affect the apps. It can affect everything. The thing is, as an industry, we need to put more pressure on venues to make sure that there's a consistent supply of connectivity across a venue, and we need to make it clear that it actually undermines the meetings and events that we're holding. So that's something that, as an industry, we really do need to get across. A lot of the problems that we've talked about today, and certainly a lot of the problems that Martin faces, would be gone if there was much better technology and much better connectivity within venues themselves, and they don't invest at the moment. I interviewed somebody from Estonia earlier on. That is a completely wired nation, because a lot of the infrastructure is very, very new. But you probably wouldn't have that problem if you went and held your event in Estonia. But that said, it's probably a destination that nobody has really considered. So also think a little bit more widely about where you're holding your events, because a lot of the new and up-and-coming destinations are incredibly well connected.
But I mean, just to come in on that, it is about planning. I mean, if you know you're going to a venue where the connectivity isn't fantastic, then and it's vital, then you put in your own. You get the experts in, and you put. It's possible, and often done, that you put in a temporary service that's dedicated and specifically designed for the purpose.
Yeah, we did that a few years ago. We had we ran a hybrid event from a country house in the UK. There's no other way of describing it. It was right in the middle of the country. It was probably the worst possible venue you could have had in that respect for the streaming. So we actually had to go out and, to John's point, we had to get a satellite booster for 2 days. So a guy that just sat there, so that we had that uncontended ability to just stream out the content. So, but you're right, I'd love to see this industry and the venues involved and all the suppliers and everybody really getting on a page where we all understand that this is a capability, this is what we need in terms of connectivity, and this is how it's all going to be financed, because it often comes back to that. We could spend 2 days on that subject alone, but it's a great point. But it is preparation always.
Yeah, and for small to medium events, these days it's not expensive to put in a satellite. If you're in, obviously if you're in Central Europe or mainland Europe, it's a few hundred to a couple of thousand a day to actually put in a satellite connection, which is not, in the scheme of things, it's not overly much, I don't think.
I think, Abby, you've got another question or two?
Hi, yes. You guys have been in the business for quite some time and have worked with a lot of event planners. Can you give me, or all of us, I guess, like the best tips you can give us to ensure that we have really high quality and really seamless events? and production. I know you guys have talked a little bit about that, but I think, like, especially given that you've probably seen a lot of things happen that go wrong often, and compared to, so it would be great to hear some tips and best practices. Thanks.
Okay, Martin, do you want to start? Do you want to start on that one?
Yeah, I think the fundamental thing is be 100% clear on why you're doing it, because that drives everything. Do you want to live stream it? If you want to live stream, why are you live streaming? Do you absolutely have to live stream? Because if you don't, why give yourself the pressure of it? If you can push it out an hour or 2 hours or even a day later, why not do that? So just be very clear on why you are doing it and what purpose it serves and what objectives it serves before you commit to doing it.
Right, okay. Marco?
Well, basically, one very simple tip I would give you is ask for references. Not only one, but a bit more than one. Are you dealing with a venue? Get references about that venue. Are you dealing with an AV supplier? Get references. Whether from that AV supplier or from colleagues or whatever, you can find out about unknown companies for you, references. I think that's very important too.
Okay, good. And your tip, Ian?
From my perspective, I think it's all about, Martin talks about objectives. For me, it's also think about your audience. Where are your audience? What do they need? So I'm talking from a communication perspective. Make sure that if you're going to hold an event, that you're getting the absolute most from it by making sure that it's reaching as many people as possible that are relevant to the actual event itself. So obviously start with the basics. If it's going to be a live event, start with as Marco said, checking out venues, checking out suppliers very thoroughly. But then look how you can extend the reach of that event beyond the four walls. So think about the use of video, think about the use of streaming, but put them all into context, like Martin was saying. Look at the objectives that you're trying to deliver ultimately. But then once you've got those objectives, find out how you can then extend the reach of it using current technology. And that goes back again to saying, get up to speed on what's out there, talk to experts, find out what is possible, but then ultimately make sure it delivers on your objectives, but is also very relevant to your audience.
Okay. Do we have one final question? And I think, well, Abby, you're in charge, so do we have to stop dead on? We do have to, okay. One final question.
My question would be, do you send like checklists to the potential customer? Because sometimes we don't think about everything because you are the specialists and we are not. So sometimes you ask a question and then it will delay the decision making because especially if we are not the ones who are making the final decision, we have to say, I have to go back to my client, or I need to check with my boss. So do you provide some checklist, and also would be useful for us, like a template of usual question that I ask my client and then I go prepare to my appointment with you?
Yes, of course there are checklists, and with those checklists, if we get these back, normally that sorry to say it like this, but normally that the checklists are for the smaller events. For the larger events, we have a very intense number of meetings and site visits with the client, and we go over all the details together, and not only with one from the client, but normally with more than 5, 6, 7 different people from the client. So that's a very intensive way of preparing a congress or a conference. But there are checklists available on almost every part of the services we can provide, of course, yes.
Yeah, I guess really you don't use suppliers that can't offer you proper consultation. As Marco was saying, really, a supplier should be prepared to at least have a decent phone conversation with you, drilling down once again into the objectives and what you're trying to achieve, and then they can produce a checklist from that. So you do an initial consultation, and then they should give you a checklist of things to look at. And I would avoid using suppliers who don't engage with you initially in that much depth, because you're going to have, find problems of areas you've not covered if you don't go to it in enough detail, really. Would you agree, Martin?
Yeah, I think we'd all count ourselves as service businesses rather than selling boxes or hiring out boxes. So it's about that relationship and understanding what your objectives are, what your problems are, and working together to resolve them. But yeah, I mean, we do have I've on numerous occasions had lists of various things to check, and they work for a while, but then the technology changes, the client requirements change, so you have to revise the lists. So they can be a bit of a false economy because they constantly need updating.
I think that's a really good point about working with the people that you can really trust as well. Because I've worked with all of you guys, I've worked with Abby for a number of years now, and we just know that we're in good hands, that we're going to find ways of working around if there are challenges. And I think that's really, really, really key, especially when it comes to something that's so complex like this. Now, the guys, before this session, they did put their 5 commonly asked questions to us. They also put answers. That's going to be made available in a document that Abby and her team are working on right now. The chap that was going to be here, Mike Clanton, who's the connectivity expert, he would be able to answer everything about Wi-Fi and what you can do and how you can put your networks together. Some of his information is going to be in the information source. So if you do want a copy of this, then just drop your business card back to Abby on the way out. And I'd like to thank the panel and thank you guys for all of your questions, because without questions, we don't really have a use for these guys in the nicest possible way. So thank you to everyone.